Hello again. Today's been quite a long day, so I'm going to try to do this video completely unscripted. I'll try not to waffle too much. So today we learned that John Dance appeared at Southwark Crown Court remotely and pleaded not guilty to 6 charges relating to fraud and elected to enter a plea on 3 relating to misrepresentation of documentation at a later date. And the trial has been set for the 20th of September 2027. So I thought it might be useful to do a little timeline. So if we go back to when I made my concerns known to the FCA, which you can see the rump of those in the description of videos 2 and 3. So that commenced in the early part of July 2021. So essentially, the trial will be held roughly about 6.25 years after that point in time, and the FCA intervened to shut down Wealth Tech in early April 2023. So it will be 4 years after that, so 4.5 years basically. When I wrote Lost the Races, I tried to be as candid as I could in how I thought this would play out. And just for reference, I'm not selling you a book here, I'm just referring to it. I have no commercial interest in it. All the royalties I receive with a little bit of top up are sent to Children's Cancer North. An ex-colleague did contact me a while back and ask why I didn't allocate the royalties to the victims, and I explained that there was unfortunately no mechanism to do that, and had I sent them to BDO, I fear that they would have been absorbed in a few hours' fees. So that's why I've chosen a charity. And I tried to explain how time would be used against the victims, whereas time is the friend of the failed institution, the FCA, with a whole range of catastrophic failures that are way beyond whistleblowing, and how time was the enemy of the victims, those wanting accountability. And throughout the series of videos, I've tried to explain to you the shortcomings of the regulator prosecutor model and how the conflicts of interest and obfuscation that reside within that serve the victims of financial scandals very poorly, and society in general. And I've often used the term inverted morality in terms of the system is set up where the victims have to accept all the upfront costs, be it mentally and financially, and those who are at fault or have failed suffer no upfront hardship. In terms of, if we take the FCA, I didn't say that they set out deliberately to harm consumers, but malfeasance on their part across a wide range of areas has almost certainly caused significant consumer harm. And I also explained how the regulator prosecutor model, it serves the regulator very well, and it serves the remuneration of legal professionals very well, and those two interests, protecting the reputation of the regulator and very generously rewarding financially legal professionals. You could probably put a cigarette paper between those two. Greatly usurp the interests and the needs of the victims, and I've come to see that as almost like a hierarchy of greed, where you have the protection of the regulator, and you have the remuneration of legal professionals standing far superior to the needs of the victims and the need to make sure that they are okay financially and mentally. It's a complete inversion of morality. And I've also focused throughout this series of videos very, very much on narrative. And together with the book Lost the Races, I've tried to explain how they will use narrative against desires for accountability from the victims, because they will try to repeat narrative that they know is inaccurate, a misrepresentation, and in certain cases false, and use that alongside time to try to amortize the ability for people to feel like they have got any real justice and accountability. The repeat narrative to keep pushing out the same messages so the public come to just either forget or accept a false narrative. And we live in a society now where the levels of immorality are at quite extraordinary levels, where even, I don't follow a political party, but if we take the current government, and I know those that preceded it were poor as well, you have a prime minister, a chancellor, a business secretary, a deputy prime minister who shamelessly pump out narrative that they know is not true. And it's very, very difficult in that time, in this time when you're up against people who will do this. And we've seen the regulator, the FCA, do it via the Chamber's speech, via a number of communications which I've dismantled in this series of videos which you can look at. And you are up against a vast level of immorality, where you are up against people who don't care if they are misleading you. They don't care if they are putting out narrative which is not true. And they don't care about the victims. The victims, however they serve, is a function of that hierarchy that I've explained to you. It's almost a bit like a capital structure. You get your senior debt holders, your junior debt holders, and your equity holders, whereas your victims are the equity holders, the last in the queue. If you get something, okay, good, but it's a function of the other needs, which is, to put it back to this model, the protection of the reputation of the regulator, the remuneration of legal professionals, and then they rank after that. I mean, I've also focused on, and again I covered this in the book and this series, the how I felt that, bearing in mind the book was written very quickly and published in April 2024, it's been fairly accurate, I think. I also focus on the concept of victims being sacrificed on the altar of the FCA's secondary objective. That is why you've had no accountability from Parliament. There is this concept to go for growth with a regulatory model which is clearly broken. And stopping and acknowledging the vast failings of the FCA in the context of wealth tech would be so embarrassing that people would almost certainly call for serious reform. They would say, I don't understand how this vast range of failures can happen, which would make a frontier market blush. I don't understand how that can happen. We must have reform, and it's just too inconvenient to let that come to the surface of debate, given the objective to drive growth via what I contend is a broken regulatory system. So I think I was entirely right in these things and saying that the victims have been sacrificed on the altar of the FCA's secondary objective. There's another angle that I'd like you to maybe consider, and it relates to the talk about ISAs right now. At the moment, people can invest up to £20,000 per tax year, either fully in a stocks and shares ISA, fully in a cash ISA, or a combination. And we're told that superstar asset allocators, Rachel Reeves and Emma Reynolds, are very unhappy with this, and it doesn't cultivate and invest their culture. And ironically, if you think about it, this period now is about the first time the investors in cash have been able to get a real return these last year or so, after we had that long period of financial repression and then a spike in inflation that followed COVID and the war in Ukraine. They now want to take that away and oblige people to take more risk. But I'm willing to contend that superstar asset allocators, Reeves and Reynolds, will not come out and say to retail investors, if you take a lot more risk with your investments, if something goes wrong and the regulator makes a whole stream of catastrophic failures, they'll obfuscate, they'll do everything they can to avoid accountability and to apologise. They will use time against you, they will pervert the course of prejudice and so on and so forth. And you may even have to pay for your own, probably will have to pay for your own audit, even though it's not your fault and you invested in a regulated investment business. You won't hear that from them. So there's another reason why they'll suppress this, and there's no conspiracy. And, I have to say, years ago, I remember when I used to, the early part of my career, I used to commute from Shrewsbury to Birmingham on the train, and a bit of a pain it was. And I read during that time Bleak House, and I don't know if you're familiar with the book. It's Dickens' sort of passionate critique of the immorality of the legal industry, and there's various motivations of why he did that, which I won't go into, and that stayed with me all this time. That was in the early noughties, so a long time ago, and I understand his point. And if you remember, if anyone's read the book Lost to the Races, I make a chilling prediction, which I still hope doesn't come true, but it's looking a bit like it, that the victims of the wealth tech scandal will face 12th of never accountability, and a Bleak House referencing the great Chancery case of John Dice and John Dice type outcome with the assets. Should a conviction be achieved and the confiscation order be then set in play, my fear is that the system would have run so long, the state and extent of the assets, you do have to fear for. I hope I'm wrong on that. And finally, I am sorry for the victims. I really am. I wish it could have been different for you. I'm not soliciting sympathy here or attention, but I can say I feel very, very bad about this. And as I hinted in the foreword of the book, Lost the Races, every day I'm in the industry, I'll try my best. It's of course a privilege to manage the assets of others, a great responsibility. But I have to say my faith in the industry and the moral foundations of which it sits on have been greatly shaken and amortized. And it does make one think about life and whether it's the right place to be. But anyway, again, I'm sorry for how it's worked out for people. It's going to be hard for you to read the repeat narrative that the FCA will inevitably put out to try to patch this up. In the meantime, take care.